The year is 2003. I'm born, and two insanely high-quality licensed games with a yellow protagonist come out. One's based on SpongeBob, and the other on The Simpsons. They both become immediate hits, and through the decades following their release, garner a giant cult following that absolutely adores them. But this is where their paths split. One game gets a full-blown remake, with a sequel to it coming in a few months, and the other is never re-released, and was left to rot on the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. Battle for Bikini Bottom definitely deserved another shot in the limelight. I don't want to take away from that, but the fact that The Simpsons Hit and Run hasn't gotten anywhere near that same treatment is a sin. This game is a masterpiece through and through, and it's one of the best pieces of Simpsons content ever created. If I'm being honest, I never got too invested in the show. I've seen quite a bit of it, but it never really stuck with me, and Hit and Run did right away. From the moment you start the game, it's fun. They don't waste your time with tutorials, nor do they make you do anything. Marge gives you an objective, but you can just kick the shit out of her instead. Mac Rating said it was okay too. When you're done having your fun with that, you can literally hop in your car and see all the map has to offer. And this first one is straight up perfect. There's so many iconic landmarks everywhere, and seeing how they all fit together is awesome. There's so much stuff for you to find too. There's tons of shortcuts and big ramps, a slew of collectibles, and most famously, the rocket car, which is one of the fastest in the game, and it lets you play around with it from the start. W game design right there. Most games take so long to get going, and it's great that you have so much available to you here before you make any progress. There's still a ton to be discovered, but it gives someone who casually picks it up to try it out so many options, and immediately gets them hooked. It did for me anyways. And when you're ready to start the actual story, it's a pretty entertaining one. It's totally separate from any episode or movie, and feels like one large, grand adventure in the town of Springfield. There's a ton going on, and each character's level focuses on one specific aspect of it, and I like it. It's way more engaging to see everything unfold from a bunch of different perspectives, and it really maintains the feeling of the show, thanks to it being written by actual Simpsons writers and all the characters having their normal voice actors. Now I could break it all down and explain everything, but you should really give it a try whenever you get the chance. If you're still asking, source? Just trust me, bro. What matters most is the gameplay, and it's just fantastic. The game's predecessor, The Simpsons Road Rage, borrowed a lot of elements from Crazy Taxi, and in that same fashion, this game stole a ton from the Grand Theft Auto series. But it's way more than your typical ripoff. It actually improved on the latest GTA games of its time and was the definitive experience. It greatly improved navigation and allowed for instant mission restarts, which are obviously in GTA now, but at the time it was groundbreaking. And personally, I prefer the driving in this game to even the latest GTA. They rip the mechanics straight from Road Rage, and that gives it such an arcade feel that I love. The more realistic approach makes driving more difficult. Controlling the car can feel more slippery, and at times stiff. But here, everything's so smooth, and it feels exactly how I'd want it to. Needless to say, it really benefited from being built off the back of a driving game, because it gave them a great foundation that helped them build up some of the other aspects of the gameplay. That said, the out-of-vehicle sections happen to be where the game's most lacking. They're just okay. Most of the sections require some basic platforming, which is straightforward and uninspired, but not broken or anything. The real issues come from this camera. It's just awful. It never shows you what you need to see, and gets stuck on crap all the time. It makes sense for the era, but when this game gets remade, they need to implement a more modern camera system. That would work wonders for the game. Other than that though, there's not much to change about the game. I mean, it hasn't held up very well visually, but it doesn't need to look realistic or anything, just match the cartoony HD look of the Simpsons game. That would look really nice. It's not like the game needs more substance or anything. There's a ton of content in the base game, and any more would kinda be overkill. There's 7 levels. Well, 3 maps, 7 levels, and each one has 7 main missions that you have to beat to move on. But if you only do the bare minimum, you're only seeing like 20% of what the area has to offer, which is crazy. There's a bonus mission in every level, a few racing missions, and tons and tons and tons of collectibles scattered everywhere. Collecting is actually a large part of the game, despite not being required whatsoever. That's where the true magic of this game comes from. Exploring every corner of the town of Springfield is so cool, and that alone would incentivize most Simpsons fans to explore every inch of these maps. And the collectibles only further that incentive, because they reward you for being curious, and in doing so, you'll find a ton of small references to episodes. Oh, and the music that plays throughout the game slaps way too hard. It's one of my favorite video game soundtracks, period. Overall, it's not hard to see that this game is a Battle for Bikini Bottom level of good, and it has just as big of a fan base. So what's up? Where's the remake? Well, there's a bit more to it than meets the eye. As you know, Disney owns the Simpsons license, which sounds like the end of the world, but think about it. Doesn't Disney have like a thing for remakes? They love to milk all the nostalgia they can out of their properties, and I don't think there's any other Simpsons product that people have begged for more than this. I could be wrong, but it's definitely up there. But the biggest thing going against it is the fact that the studio that made the game, Radical Entertainment, isn't around anymore. They exist, but they don't work on their own projects, and instead support the almighty Activision. Those guys are known for awful cash grab license games that suck monkey nuts, so I don't think Disney's gonna want them touching their precious Simpsons. If it weren't for that, I think it would be a really good possibility. SpongeBob Rehydrated sold really well, and it did well enough to warrant a sequel, so who's to say that wouldn't happen for The Simpsons too? It makes so much sense, but due to the headache required to figure out the logistics of getting this game remade by a competent studio, it'll probably never happen. It needs to, but it won't. I'd even take a straight up port at this point, but the biggest underlying problem is with the licensing nightmare, so they wouldn't go through the trouble for something so small. It is such a good game, and it pisses me off that there's no way to play it on modern consoles. With a fresh coat of paint and some minor tweaks to improve the camera, the game would be perfect. Honestly, it would benefit from the remake treatment way more than Battle for Bikini Bottom. That game was great as it was, and didn't have any real issues to address. Its remaster just made things worse. But in this game's case, there are some things to clean up, and in doing so, the quality of the experience as a whole would skyrocket. I'd want to see some more creative missions added, and maybe an extra area or two, but it wouldn't be necessary whatsoever. But I want to know your thoughts on this. What needs to happen to make this remake happen? Let me know down in the comments. And if you think this game doesn't deserve one, explain that to me, because it definitely does.